including Jim in Ealing. Jim, what would you like to say?
I just doubt the sincerity of the offer, James. I'm a big fan. But the thing is, the Challenger 2 tank is not a VW Polo. I can't just give you the keys, expect you to hop in and drive to Kiev.
No, but this would involve training as well and support, wouldn't it?
I mean, but then to the point where, are we putting boots on the ground? Are we putting tank crews? The British Army spend hours, weeks drilling in these tanks to get good at them. And this sort of myth, I think, and it's a myth the Germans fell foul of in World War II, that their tanks were superior, is not true. I mean, the Challenger's the 125mm rifled barrel, excellent gun. I mean, the 120mm rifle, and the T-72 is the 120 smoothbore. But both are very capable.
You're going to have to. No offence, and it's not a criticism, but you're going to have to drop the jargon because it doesn't mean anything to anybody listening except you at the moment.
Basically, they've both got big guns.
Thank you.
And
there you go.
This idea that a Challenger is going to smash through a column of T-72s, which I get the impression...
But no one's saying that, though. All I'm hearing is that the direct hit from a T-72 would be survived by a Challenger 2. It wouldn't be survived by anything that Ukraine currently...
Potentially where it's hit, if it's hit front onwards, I mean...
No, but again, listen, Jim, you used to do... what were you in the army, just out of interest?
I used to maintain the tanks.
Right, so you know a hell of a lot more about this than I do, and I appreciate your insights and your input, but I know what I'm being told, and what I'm being told is that the Challenger 2 has a much better chance of surviving a direct hit from a T-72 than anything that Ukraine currently has, and that obviously becomes something of quite high significance in the context of an engagement between squadrons of both tanks. So there is, I mean, it might not be as exciting as perhaps the Ministry of Defence or the Daily Telegraph wants us to think it is, but it is an improvement. It is a measurable and significant improvement on where we are today from a Ukrainian point of view.
From a Russian point of view, the biggest failing they've had is their logistics. Now, are these tanks going to be properly serviced, maintained?
But they're not going to make it worse. They're not going to make anything worse. I appreciate, they need a bunch of gyms as well, is what you're really telling us. If you really want this to work...
These tanks advance so quickly, I doubt I'd have a clue.
But I naively, perhaps, I am confident that they won't be sending the boxes without the instructions and the batteries.
Well, I'm just concerned about sending out these inexperienced crews.
Yes, I understand that. I understand that. So let's not. I mean, let's not. Go all. Forgive the pun. All guns blazing into our support for this. But I don't think we're going to disagree on the fact that it's not going to make anything worse, and the odds are it's going to make things better. The only debate to have is how much better.
Yes, of course.
And Zelensky wants the tanks. Zelensky wants the tanks. He's been clear about that. I mean, I think he's been even clearer about wanting the German-made Leopard 2s, hasn't he? But the Challengers are going to come in pretty useful too. So, he's there. He's on the ground. He knows what he can do and what he can't do, and he knows what he wants.
Fair enough. Yeah? This is the thing. I'm not entirely aware of what the Ukrainians' exact capability would be with regards to these tanks.
Well, thankfully, nor was Vladimir Putin with regards to everything, and that's why the war is still going on.
The Russian fleet is large, and a lot of it is outdated, and there is a large proportion of the fleet that, in fact, the Challenger would just drive through.
Yes.
And would be very successful. It's just if it meets a T-90 or an upgraded T-72, but then that's to be expected in war, isn't it? And I do think that giving them the correct equipment and protection could see a swifter end. And I know the idea of adding more guns, you would assume would have more casualties, but in fact having the right equipment and stuff can sometimes mean that we have a swifter resolution, and in fact there are less casualties. So
or more in a shorter amount of time, but less over the longer period of time that would unfold. Briefly, Jim, drawing upon your experience, or not, actually. It's entirely up to you how much you draw upon your experience. The moral case, I know it's sometimes a bit unhelpful to talk about moral cases for war. From St. Augustine onwards, it's been a fairly tricky issue. But do you think do you think it would be the, quotes, right thing, end quotes, to do to send these tanks?
Well, I see tanks aren't just defensive. They're defensive pieces of equipment, and they protect the people who are inside them. So morally, I would say it's probably more morally correct to send equipment like tanks than it is long-range missiles, things like this that can be fired at civilians. I mean, this is more something that actually protects columns of soldiers advancing or retreating. So I think morally a tank is It's all grey, of course.
Of course
but I
it
think
is.
morally, tanks are better than other equipment you could potentially send, and they're less likely to harm civilians.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. I think you'll appreciate this from Phil, Jim, before you go. He says, James, as a semi-regular military contributor to your programme, finally you're talking about the big issues of smoothbore versus rifle bore main battle tank barrels. Let me go full partridge and discuss track replacement timelines next, please. I presume you understand that.
Yes.
Well, that makes one of us.
LBC.